From the start, I loved cameras. The tactile, almost sensuous pleasure in a beautiful piece of equipment. But it was the enlargements of the pictures I took that really fascinated me. To make a film entirely by yourself, which initially I did, you may not have to know very much about anything else, but you must know about photography. Photography certainly gave me the first step up to movies. Since I'd read Podovkin and was a photographer, what could prevent me from making a movie? I could load the camera, shoot, and I would have a movie. If I hadn't been a photographer, I would have lacked the one essential ingredient you have to put anything on film.
His body of work is probably one of the most incredible bodies of work in the history of the business. I mean, when you think of the subjects that he's chosen to deal with and the results are so varied. I mean, when you go to science fiction like 2001 and you go to satire like Dr. Strangelove, then you have a bizarre love story like Lolita, and then a World War I anti-war film like Pairs of Glory. And I mean, we can go on and on.
Those movies don't date, you know. There's something in the condition of those films that doesn't age and date and rot.
The very meaninglessness of life forces man to create his own meanings. However vast the darkness, we must supply our own light.
What's the point of making films unless you're going to experiment with the medium? You know, the whole point of filmmaking is showing the world from a different perspective. Use the medium. Show us why we're watching it on film and not in a stage play. Very few directors do it. He's one of the great cinema magicians.
Why do I make movies? Why shouldn't I make them? What else should I be doing? I think Orson Welles' remark sums it up. A movie studio is the best toy a boy ever had.
Orson Welles or Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton or Capra didn't go to film school. They didn't study filmmaking and screenwriting. They were people that had lives and wanted to find a way of interpreting the experiences that they had in life. And they took a motion picture camera and they found a way to bring those experiences into a cinematic form. And thank goodness Stanley Kubrick got out of Hollywood and left to continue searching as an individual for his own interpretation. Stanley's still living a life. He's not influenced by the pop culture. He's somebody who I believe is searching for a truth, the deeper truth, always the underbelly of life, that he never finds the joy in life. Perhaps he thinks that life is a very vicious struggle, that those apes in 2001 that we evolved from are still very much alive in each and every one of us.
Here's a man who really breaks every rule they, the business, live by. He insists on working 6,000 miles away from home base. He does not really show or confide a screenplay and offer plans of what he wants to do. He doesn't ask for comments. He doesn't accept comments. He works without any normal notion of schedule or budget. He makes quite expensive films, and it's quite extraordinary that he's able to exert from that distance the kind of authority and mystique that keeps this going. But of course, he has this attitude, this assertion, this self-assertion, this defiance of normality. I will not leave England to work. And one thought occurs to me, which is that Kubrick is a version of a character type much beloved in Hollywood, which I think of as the Howard Hughes type, the paranoid megalomaniac.
Having dinner with him, he'll start eating stewed pears or something when you're just having the meat, you know, and you go, Stan, what do you... And he'll take a piece of pork, a piece of pear, or a piece of cream cake or something. Why are you... Oh, well, it's just food. I mean, this is how Napoleon ate. I went, uh-oh, uh-oh. Well, we don't have to call you Bonaparte, though, do we? You know.
All wars are alike. We talked a lot about the classical war literature, you know, from the Iliad through Stendhal, through Hemingway, that there is a cutoff point where the differences from war to war become minimal, that every war, when you're in it, is the same. I think Stanley approached it from that view, you know, not an Olympian view, but with a certain tact and distance, and the idea that he wanted a kind of long look at the Vietnam War that didn't particularize the characteristics of the Vietnam War as such.
Start the cameras, this is Vietnam, the movie! Yeah, Joker can be John Wayne, I'll be a horse. C.H.G. Rock can be a rock. I'll be Aunt Margaret.
Animal Mother can be a rabid buffalo. I'll be General Custer.
Who'll be the Indians? Hey, we'll let the Gooks play the Indians.
Stanley told me one thing. He says, Lee, I want it real. And I said, Stanley, I wouldn't give it to you any other way.
I am Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, your senior drill instructor. From now on, you will speak only when spoken to. And the first and last words out of your filthy sewers will be, sir. Do you maggots understand that?
Sir, yes, sir.
Bullshit, I can't hear you. Sound off like you got a pair.
Sir, yes, sir.
I approached Arliss Howard, who played the character of Cowboy in the film, and I had an entire page of dialogue to do, and knowing that, you can understand how it's easy enough I'm talking as fast as I can, and I'm hitting as fast as I can and hard as I can, and I lost my way.
Are you shook up? Are you nervous?
Sir, I am, sir.
Do I make you nervous?
Sir.
Sir, what? Are you about to call me an asshole?
Rather than stop, I just continued on, and I came up with a line, yo!
I'll bet you're the kind of guy that would fuck a person in the ass and not even have the goddamn common courtesy to give him a reach around. I'll be watching you.
And then we continued on.
I'd love to take credit for those lines. I mean, I'd be a little ashamed as well, but they're fabulous, fabulous lines. Very true, really funny, great language, and it plays.
And when Stanley cut, he jumped off of the camera car and he ran up to me and he says, Lee, what's a reach around? And I said, Stanley, use your imagination here. He says, oh my God. He says, we got to keep that in. We'll keep that in, okay?
One of the things about his career that disappoints me is that at the end of the arc, or at least at the latest point on the arc, he makes a film with extraordinary technical skill, a very beautiful film, Full Metal Jacket, but an empty film. I don't know what it's about. I don't know why he made it. I don't know what we're meant to think or feel beyond the notion that militarism is a grim, odious discipline. That is a point that is made in 30 seconds in Paths of Glory, and is made, I think, almost better in Fear and Desire.
Now a civilian again, I ran into Stanley Kubrick in the street. I guess it was near 1600 Broadway, which is like a film building in New York City. And we recognized each other, and he told me that since he had last seen me, he has done a second feature film. It turned out to be a picture called Killer's Kiss. And I was told that he not only photographed the picture, and that he had written the script, and that he had edited the film, that because of restraints in terms of money, these constraints meant that he had to shoot the film completely silent, like with guide tracks, and then post-sync all the dialogue, which he did himself and edited it all. Needless to say how impressed I was that one human being could do all of this and have the picture at least be what it was. He said, well, I've just sold the picture to United Artists, and incidentally, they said to me that if I wanted to do another film, the door is always open at UA. You can form a corporation. When we shook hands and said we're partners, 50-50, we will never, ever insist on anything if the other person is not willing to go along. He mostly convinced me, which because he was usually right. So after work that night, I went to a bookstore, and it was called Scribner's. It was a big bookstore on Fifth Avenue in New York. And I looked around the bookshelves under the mystery and westerns or whatever that was, and I saw this book that was called Clean Break, written by a man named Lionel White, and it seemed to be a story about the robbery of a racetrack. That turned out to be a picture called The Killing. We had something going for us that was really unique in the novel itself. Clean Break had a structure of flashbacks and bringing each participant in the robbery up to a certain point and then going back.
Little Arnie is third by a length and a quarter, and Seymour's Darling. Passing the half-mile post, it is Red Lightning by a length and a quarter. I'm hoping is second by a half a length. Seymour's Darling is third, and Little Arnie moving fast on the outside. Into the far turn, it is Red Lightning in front by a length and a quarter. Little Arnie is second by half a length. And the horse is down. It is Red Lightning. At the head of the stretch, it is I'm Hoping taking the lead by a half a length. Little Arnie drives on the outside.
Nicky was dead at 4:24. At 2:15 that afternoon, Johnny Clay was still in the city. He knew exactly how long it would take him to drive to the track, park his car, and walk to the grandstand. He planned to arrive just before the start of the 7th race.